Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranchana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranchana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajakatraya Ashtotirashatra Shri Srimad Bhagavatam Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakatraya Ashtotirashatra Shri Srimad Bhagavatam Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavananda Ki Jai Nama Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Yamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinda Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, The Creative Impetus, Chapter 13, Urhugana converses with Jadbar, and we're on text 17. Tyre Vanchito Hamsa Kulam Samavishan Arochayan Shilam Upaiti Vanaran Tajjati Rasena Sunir Vitendriyaha Parasparo Vikshana Vismritavyadihi Tarvangchito Hamsakulam Samavishan Arochayan Shilamupaiti Vanaran Tajjati Rasena Sunivritendriya Parasparo Vikshana Vismritavadi Tarvanchito Hamsakulam Samavishan Arocharan Shilam Paitivan Tajjati Rasena Sunir Vitendriya Parasparo Vikshana Vismritavadihi Tarvanchito Hamsakulam Samavishan Arocharan Shilam Paitivan Tajjati Rasena Sunirvitendriya Parasparo Vikshana Vismritavadihi. Anyone from Zoom?
Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. 1 second. Devi Jyato Hansakula Samavisha Narochayan Shilamupeti Vanaran Tajjatirasena Suni Vrutin Utrendriya Parasparo Dikshana Vismrutavadihi.
Okay, word by word. Tai, by them, the cheaters and pretenders, the so-called yogis, swamis, incarnations and gurus. Vanchitaha, being cheated. Hamsakulam, the association of great Paramahamsas, or devotees. Samavishan, contacting. Arochayan, not being satisfied with. Shilam, their behavior. Apaiti, approaches. Vanaran, the monkeys, which are all debauchees with no good character. Tatjati rasena, by sense gratification in the association of such debauchees. Sunirvita indriyaha, being very satisfied with getting the opportunity of sense gratification. Paraspara, of one another. Udvikshana, by seeing the faces. Vismrita, who has forgotten. Avadihi, the end of life. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, HG Bhakti Swami Prabhupada. Being cheated by them, the living entity in the forest of the material world tries to give up the association of these so-called yogis, swamis, and incarnations, and come to the association of real devotees. But due to misfortune, he cannot follow the instructions of the spiritual master or advanced devotees. Therefore, he gives up their company and again returns to the association of monkeys, who are simply interested in sense gratification and women. He derives satisfaction by associating with sense gratifiers and enjoying sex and intoxication. In this way, he spoils his life simply by indulging in sex and intoxication. Looking into the faces of other sense gratifiers, he becomes forgetful and thus approaches death. Purport. Sometimes a foolish person becomes disgusted with bad association and comes to the association of devotees and Brahmins and takes initiation from a spiritual master. As advised by the spiritual master, he tries to follow the regulative principles, but due to misfortune, he cannot follow the instructions of the spiritual master. He therefore gives up the company of devotees and goes to associate with simian people who are simply interested in sex and intoxication. Those who are so-called spiritualists are compared to monkeys. Outwardly, monkeys sometimes resemble sadhus because they live naked in the forest and pick fruits, but their only desire is to keep many female monkeys and enjoy sex life. Sometimes so-called spiritualists seeking a spiritual life come to associate with Krishna-conscious devotees, but they cannot execute the regulative principles or follow the path of spiritual life. Consequently, they leave the association of devotees and go to associate with sense gratifiers, who are compared to monkeys. Again, they revive their sex and intoxication, and looking at one another's faces, they are thus satisfied. In this way, they pass their lives up to the point of death. Om Gyanativarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshunmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Mukam Kariravachalam Pangam Langai Tegirim Yakipatamaham Vande Shri Gurunditaranam Vancha Koptribishta Kripa Sindhubevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So earlier in the Bhagavatam, the first canto, there's a verse which is describing a grihamedi, a materialistic attached householder, and just the state of materialists in general. Shotavyadini Rajendra Nirnam Santa Sahasrashaha Apashyatam Atma Tattvam Griheshu Grihamedinam. That the people in general, they have so many things to hear and discuss, thousands, millions of topics. But they don't inquire into the absolute truth. They just go on hearing all this other stuff. And then they're blind to knowledge of the self, who they really are, and what's the goal of life. So, and then there's grihastas, which it's like night and day. There's grihastas and there's grihamedis. It is like night and day. Where the grihastas are those who are married, but they have spiritual goals. They have understanding. They're interested in Atma Tattva. They're interested in knowing who they are. They're interested in knowing who is Krishna. They're interested in engaging in Krishna consciousness. Whereas the grihamedi they don't have any interest whatsoever. So, so for those who are married, or for those who will be married, it's important to be be engaged in Krishna consciousness. it's important to follow the principles of religion, follow the principles of Krishna that he outlines for the grihastas, which is mentioned in 7th canto in detail, which we're gradually making our way towards the 7th canto. Just yesterday we had, let's see here. Just yesterday we had our Madhusudan Prabhu. He left, means his body was diseased, and he left, passed away, left his body last night. And he was a grihasta. I mean, he was faithful, faithful follower of Srila Prabhupada, and which some people think, oh, okay, well, what's the big deal? So what? He was a faithful follower. Means he managed to have faith in Srila Prabhupada throughout his life, considered himself Prabhupada's son. But there's a lot to that, actually, because people, and him being in a faithful, committed relationship with his wife, Kanchan Bala, for so many years. There's something to that, because this age is just an age of faithlessness, where people have faith in all the wrong things. They're ashra, bad shelters. They have faith in so many things, but they're all bad. So to find somebody who has faith in Krishna, to have faith in Srila Prabhupada, have faith in the process of Krishna consciousness, it's rare. And you could say, like, this is the age of non-commitment. I mean, people are just not committed. It is so hard to find people who could just be committed to something, means something meaningful, or committed to Krishna consciousness, committed to truth. It's very difficult to find somebody like that. But he was like that. He was very committed. He always considered himself a son of Srila Prabhupada, which he is. But of course, the body, like a car, breaks down. It does its thing, right? When a car is old, certain things stop working, and then eventually it just has to be discarded. So similarly, the body's like that. The body it does its thing. It gets old, right? Gray hairs, things stop working, and then eventually it just has to be discarded. Or as the saying goes, time and tide wait for no man or wait for no one. You can't go to the ocean. If you go to the ocean, we're very close. You go to the ocean and you say, hey, wait, stop. The waves are coming. Stop. And you go there every single day, right? Stop. What's going to be achieved by that? People think, oh, this person's crazy. This person's insane. To think that they could stop the waves, right? Can't stop them. Or the example is given, okay, you're hitting, you're out there with a paddle, and you're beating the waves. I mean, that's also, it's a sign of insanity. You don't get anything done like that. So to think that will stop the waves, it's insanity. So in time also, you look at the clock here. Okay, it's 8:08, right? Stop. You could yell at the clock all day long. Stop, stop. It's not going to stop. It keeps on going. Tick, 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 tick. It's going. So, so time means the body's getting older, means diseases a lot of the times are manifesting from old age. It doesn't stop for anybody. And even just goes to show, I mean, they had a very good relationship, Kanchan Bala Mataji and Madhusudan Prabhu. I mean, their original devotees, a married couple of ISKCON, 1966, I think. So, yeah. So all these years, but by the force of time, to separate. So, but a great example, he being a committed, responsible householder, and very soft-hearted, kind person, very fatherly towards the brahmacharis and people in general. And yeah, he wasn't some, big manager or world preacher or, something like that. But he was a humble devotee, so that was his credit. So anyways, there was this nice letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote him, because apparently he was expressing some doubts to Srila Prabhupada. Actually, Srila Prabhupada, he exchanged quite a few letters with Srila Prabhupada. If you look it up in the database, it's like quite a few. I was like, wow, it's a lot. It's like Prabhupada was responding. So Madhusudan Prabhu was one of those around 7,000 letters Srila Prabhupada answered. And he wrote him at least a dozen letters, not more. But I think more like 20, something like that, 25. So, anyways, one particular letter, I actually went to Madhusudan Prabhu's house, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, and I was visiting with him. Jamal was there learning how to paint from Kanchan Bala. But anyways, so I wanted to stop by. So we were speaking, Madhusudan Prabhu and myself, and he was showing me Srila Prabhupada's letters Srila Prabhupada wrote to him. And he pointed out this one specific letter that I thought was stood out, and it actually stood out to him too, because he was expressing some doubts to Srila Prabhupada. And I won't read the whole letter, I'll just read an excerpt from it. And he was, when he wrote this letter to Srila Prabhupada, his letter to Srila Prabhupada, he said, "Oh Prabhupada, I'm having these doubts, and I'm hoping that Madhusudan will kill these doubts, because in the Bhagavad Gita, says, right, oh Madhusudan, killer of the enemy, right? So, killer of the demon Madhu, right? So anyways, he was kind of, trying to be poetic, writing this letter to Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada responded to him. So this is the excerpt from Srila Prabhupada's letter, which was also poetic. So Prabhupada said to him, "You say that you will do as I say, and you also prayed to Madhusudan, Krishna, to slay the demon of your doubt. But unless you act according to the direction of Madhusudan, Krishna, how can Madhusudan, Krishna, or Madhusudan's father help you?" So Madhusudan's father, Prabhupada's referring to himself, Madhusudan's father. So you prayed to Madhusudan to slay the demon of your doubt, but unless you act according to the direction of Madhusudan, how can Madhusudan or Madhusudan's father help you? So, and he was commenting that I was trying to be very poetic and using my words wisely, and Srila Prabhupada, he responded like that. So anyways, yeah, he left, and it's a loss to the community. So just a few words about him. So here in this particular purport, saying that foolish people, they become disgusted after being cheated by so many yogis and swamis, and then they come to the association of devotees, and they take initiation from the spiritual master, and they try to follow the instructions of the spiritual master. But due to misfortune, they can't follow the instructions, and they give up the association of devotees and go associate with monkey-like people. So, which Srila Prabhupada comments on in the next chapter as well, the nature of monkey-like people, because this is an outline more or less of the force of material enjoyment, and then it goes into more detail in the next chapter. So to come to the association of devotees, that's the most fortunate position to be in, to actually come into the association of devotees, to start practicing Krishna consciousness. And then to leave, that's very unfortunate. And not only do people leave, is that they go and associate with, Srila Prabhupada says here, monkey-like people. And he says that a lot of these people, and why does he say monkeys? Because a lot of them outwardly, like monkeys, for example, outwardly they're, living in the forest, not wearing any clothes, eating fruits, right? In other words, they're vegetarian. But their particular goal or their particular aspiration is just, they have a bunch of female monkeys, right? To keep many female monkeys to enjoy sex. That's their goal. So, and you see, you go to Vrindavan, and means, and there's a lot of monkeys there, and yeah, they're just up to no good. Jumping around, stealing people's stuff, up to just no one's really that fond of them. People are, try to stay away from the monkeys, right? They have monkey sticks. So you could say that the modern age is filled with a lot of people who are, in essence, no better than these monkeys. And they may pose as very spiritually advanced and so on. But because they're not following basic principles of spiritual life, or you could say even human life, then they're not considered to be valuable association, to say the least. Actually, poisonous association. So these principles, the four regulative principles, no illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, meat eating, these are the basic principles that allow one to make progress in spiritual life. Of course, adding the practices of Krishna consciousness. And it's hard to find any spiritual groups these days who promote these principles. I mean, even the most basic one of vegetarianism, this is like extremely basic. It's hard to find groups that even promote that. Even big groups, I'm talking big spiritual groups within India, right? It's hard to find, which is quite interesting because there's still a lot of vegetarians in India. There's still this idea of protecting the cow in India. But a lot of people are turning against that, trying to imitate the West. But even in these big groups, spiritual groups, they don't preach vegetarianism. They just say, oh, eat whatever you want, right? It doesn't matter. But it does matter. And what to speak of in the Western world and modern day Christianity. It's hard to find groups that promote this. Of course, there's the Seventh-day Adventists. Not that it is of any super significance or something, but my grandmother, great-grandmother, she was Seventh-day Adventist, pious lady, and she was vegetarian. But they promote it there. But it's hard to find. What to speak of all the other principles? Because if you're not following this basic principle, vegetarianism, what to speak of following other principles? So yeah, it's hard to find. But so if one comes to the process of Krishna consciousness and they're thinking, oh well, there's all these rules and regulations. This is too much. Let me go back and associate with the simian people. Is that how you say it? Simian? Yeah. Let me go associate with those people. Let me go be a monkey, right? Jump free, run free. We should understand that this is just Maya, illusory energy just talking in our ear, right? This is the call of illusion. And if somebody does find it difficult to follow certain principles, or philosophically to accept, oh, why do I have to follow these principles? And therefore, practically speaking, having difficulty following the principles, then the idea is that they can or we can apply ourselves to the process. Because if we apply ourselves to the process in a proper way, then it will be less difficult to follow these principles, and at one point it will be easy to follow them. We will think that there's no greater thing than to follow the principles that Krishna outlines, the regulative principles, to chant 16 rounds, to engage in the devotional service of Krishna. We'll think that there's no greater thing. And to not live like that, we rather die. We rather, we don't want to live like that. So in other words, in the beginning, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, it may seem like, what? Poison, right? Very difficult. But over time, it's in the end, but also throughout, over time, it becomes like nectar. We derive great happiness following Krishna's instructions. And also intoxication. I mean, people are attached, right? We're here in Pacific Beach. There's, like in Vrindavan, they say there's 5,000 big and small temples. So in Pacific Beach, there's 5,000, bars. Not 5,000, but there's a lot. If you add the tattoo shops and the bars, there's a lot. It's like a pilgrimage site, right? For crows. There's a lot. Nrsinga Krishna Prabhu in Turkey, Istanbul, he told me that in Istanbul, he said, I have to get the number, I'm pretty sure he said there's thousands of mosques, amazing, big and small. So intoxication, it's a common activity. People like to do it. And some devotees may be pulled towards it. Maybe some lingering desires to get intoxicated. Some not, but maybe some are. But this particular intoxication, it's just, you could say, a demented or perverted or distorted, Hare Krishna, distorted reflection. I think he's going to bring you some prasadam, sir. It's a distorted reflection of us wanting to, of course, we're pleasure-seeking beings by nature, because Krishna is. It's a distorted reflection of us wanting or us experiencing the bliss of love for Krishna. In other words, we can't experience the bliss and love of Krishna in this particular state, and we may not be interested. All right, so let us head to the bar, right? Let us go to the bar, or let us do some other drugs, right? When the bar becomes boring, let's, make our way up to higher levels of, intoxication. But our people are looking for peace through intoxication, right? My mind is driving me crazy. Okay, let me take intoxication and my mind will settle down, right? So, but Krishna consciousness, it is the best form of real spiritual intoxication. As Srila Prabhupada said about his disciples, early disciples, because Prabhupada was making disciples in San Francisco, and there was a lot of LSD in San Francisco. What does LSD stand for anyways? Huh? Long chemical. Lysergic acid something. How do you know? I'm just joking. So, yeah, so LSD, you take it, right? I never did it, but you take it, you put it. That's why I have a brain. You put a little tablet on your tongue. It dissolves. I think you could put it on your skin too. It dissolves, and then you start hallucinating. Wow, look at the colors, and everything's moving, and right. Of course, you could have bad trips too, right? It means very unpleasant nightmares, but everything's moving and whatever. People like it. So, a lot of people are doing that in San Francisco. So Prabhupada was making disciples from that bunch of people who were experimenting with that, and in a sense, to their credit, they weren't just doing it to numb their mind or something. They had some idea. Okay, let me higher consciousness. Let me elevate myself here. So, anyways, one time Srila Prabhupada was challenged because Prabhupada, aristocratic, right, gentleman coming from the lands of India, Bharat Varsha. I don't think LSD was going on over there, but. So Prabhupada had no experience of it, but he said I never touched any of that his whole life. But anyways, one man challenged him, because a lot of people are challenging people in San Francisco, challenging him in San Francisco, all types of stuff, a bunch of really wild people. So anyways, they challenged him in San Francisco. When you read the Lilamrita, you'll see that Prabhupada was challenged a lot in San Francisco. But so anyways, one person challenged him. He said, "Oh, Swami, you're saying that Krishna consciousness is better than LSD. But how do you know?" He said, "You've never done it." Which, you could say on some angle of vision, someone may see that as a good argument. But they said, "You never did it, Swami. How do you know?" And then Prabhupada said, "Okay, that's true. I never did it. That's true." But he said, "See my disciples here?" He said, "They did it. They had plenty of LSD." And he said, all of them, they gave it up for Krishna consciousness, for the chanting of Hare Krishna. So the man, it's a good point. It's logical. So whether it's this principle, that principle, whether it's this attachment, that attachment, ultimately the process of Krishna consciousness, although it may seem poisonous in the beginning, means unpleasant. Over time, we could experience more of the happiness of Krishna consciousness, and then we won't be forced by material nature or by our own unlawful desires to enter the association of simian people and be lost in that jungle, right, jumping around. So, okay, does anybody have any questions? Yes, Bajran Swami, or comments?
Oh, thanks. Just as a sidelight, I do have a question, but you're talking even the basic principle of vegetarianism. You know that Greenpeace does not promote vegetarianism? And there's a memo of their top board, and they realize if they push for vegetarianism, it'll destroy their donor base. They'll lose so many people. So there's save the whales, and those are all noble things. Save the whales, save the pandas, save the, whatever it is. But because if the simplest thing you could do to save the planet is be a vegetarian. Yeah. As far as the environment. And even that they don't do, and it's because of money. But the question is, tell that next time you meet one of those guys signing one of those, asking you to sign a petition. I've tried it a few times, and they don't have much to say. But the question is, you were talking about being consistent, being steady, making a commitment.
Yeah.
Well, I say that's boring.
Yeah.
Variety is the mother of enjoyment, and if you don't change and grow and dump that wife and get a different one and move to a different place, you're talking about jumping like a monkey, but that's not jumping. That's exploring. That's experiencing the totality that life has to give. And you guys are just locked in a little box, stuck in your rut.
Yeah. All right.
I see. I didn't sway.
Yeah, there was one devotee years ago. He's a god brother of. He's a disciple of Bhakti Kashyap, a god brother of Tirtha Maharaj. But anyways, Tirtha Maharaj was cultivating him, and this particular devotee happened to be from India, but he was living in America, and he was thinking about being a brahmachari, joining the ashram, and then somehow or other he didn't do it. He was, he just didn't do it. Now he's married. I've seen him a few times over the years, L.A. Rathayach, and he has a wife and children, and still practicing Krishna consciousness, and good devotee. But anyways, I remember years ago we were discussing this idea of him joining the ashram, and we were discussing ashram life, because I was there for some years by that time in the ashram. And we were discussing, and one of the things that we were speaking about was this idea that people think, oh, you need you need something new, which you could say is coming from the soul. We don't want, stale old things. We want something fresh. We want something new. We want something adventurous, right? Exciting, whatever. We want something that will continues to bring us continuous happiness. So, but when I was discussing with this devotee, we came to the point that if you analyze a lot of people in the world, and maybe you could say most, they're all doing the same thing every day. I mean, for the most part, most people, majority, because the world has been created in a certain way, and the way it has been created is that, generally speaking, people have to work, and they have to work for money, and then they have to get the house, and they have to pay the mortgage and the apartment or rent, and in general, all over the world, the whole corporations have worked it out. You get 2 weeks off, or however many weeks, whatever. So in other words, people have a certain job all over the world, and a lot of them are locked into it, whether they like it or not. And another thing is a lot of people don't like their jobs. So if you could find a job you like, I guess you're fortunate. But and they have the same routines. They go to this, like a lot of these people, you see, if you happen to be driving by, right, after Harinam or something or whatever, you go downtown, and on Friday night, and a lot of the same people are down there. They're going to the same bar, and so they may say that, oh, you being committed to spiritual life, you being committed to chanting Hare Krishna, you being committed to distributing books, or you being committed to a temple or something like that, oh, that's boring. But it's like, all right, well, what are you committed to? Yeah, and is that not boring, And what's so fresh about that, right? And I think a lot of the times devotees coming from backgrounds which aren't super spiritual, in other words, they had experience in the material world, they could tell people like, hey, I had experience in the material world, I'm not coming from super religious Brahminical family and in India. I have experience of the material world. In other words, I was committed to material world, right, and everything it stands for, but now I'm committed to spiritual life, and it's a lot better. So, and also the principle of boredom. You say, oh, it's bored. Well, actually, I did a study recently. There's so many studies going on, but and they do have something to them, but that nowadays a lot of people are bored. It's interesting that despite all of the facilities for entertainment at their fingertips, still so many people are bored. And somebody was commenting that the attention span is like heavily degrading nowadays, and they went as far as to say is that of like a goldfish, which is like 8 seconds, So people are becoming more and more bored. And this one philosopher, in some sense it makes sense, but he said that boredom can be seen to be the root of all evil, because people are bored Because you're bored, and means it's a state of dissatisfaction. You're bored. You're like, what am I supposed to do with my life? And the reason why people are bored is that they're not engaged in anything meaningful in their life, so they feel bored. And then by this boredom, it causes all types of things: antisocial behavior, addiction, so many things. So yeah, the devotees aren't bored. That's the last thing. The devotees are bored. I mean, I've experienced a lot of different emotions, right? Or devotees have joined to experience a lot of different emotions, right, in spiritual life. But boredom is, yeah, there's always something going on. So, anyways, that's.
Prabhu, I have one.
And just one more thing. Sridhar Swami, Prabhupada's disciple, he was asked about how do you have a successful temple. And he gave a interesting answer. He said, you need 10 years and 10 years and 10 dedicated devotees. I remember Tirthamaj, there was a group of brahmacharis here, and he held a meeting, and he said this to us with the idea that, hey, let's commit here. But again, it's hard to find people, to commit. But anyways.
If I might, it's Krishna's arrangement. There's a little, it's small, how I met A.C. Swami Bhaktivedanta. Mm-hmm. This is an article by Madhusudan about how he came, and it's exactly pertinent to being saved from drugs, which is what the class is about. If I would just take a sec. I had a, quote, normal childhood, had fights with the kids on the block, envied my older brother for his associations with pretty girls, and tried to be a number one lover myself all through my school days. I started taking marijuana in my senior year in high school. This appeared in BTG 15, which is the middle of 1967, 55 years ago. I started taking marijuana in my senior year in high school. After my first semester of college at the age of 17, I went traveling through Europe and North Africa, trying to squeeze some enjoyment out of all I came across. After running out of money, I came to the Greenwich Village, Manhattan, where I somehow came upon the joy-spreading chanters of Hare Krishna in Tompkins Square Park. My feeling about it was that it was nice. However, at this time, I did not think that there was anything serious in these names of God. I thought that these were merely words. I also thought it strange to have a rug in the middle of a park. I did not inquire further. I began drowning myself in psychedelic drugs such as LSD and DMT, thinking myself a very advanced creature. At the same time, I became serious about my relationship to everything around me, and I asked questions as to who I was and where I was going. I then went to Haight-Ashbury area in San Francisco to live with some people I had met in the Greenwich Village. I got too serious about bodily relationships with people and the world, thinking that I was this body and relating to everything in this manner. In trying to be a, quote, virtuous creature, I was seeking the perfection of life in these relationships through drugs, which I truly felt to be the answer to the problems of mankind. He wasn't alone. That's the mood that time. I deemed myself one of the discoverers of the newly found panacea. Such is an example of illusion. In my quest for knowledge, that is, in finding the answers to my questions, the question, who is God, arose. This was the supreme quest. Then, during one trip, I was sure I had realized God, and afterward desperately tried to put what I thought to be in my new knowledge to practical use. I soon entered a mental hospital. I was then delivered back to New York and started sessions with a psychotherapist. One day, by the grace of God, I came upon the temple storefront, 26 Second Avenue. The first thing that struck me was that the people were so warm and friendly and had no arrogance of attitude. They answered my numerous questions completely, for as I have learned, this is a complete philosophy, and the practical method is guaranteed. After coming to service once, I returned for each one after that. Dancing and chanting the praises of Lord Krishna is so nice. Our kind Lord reveals himself to his devotees in proportion to their devotion. Much of the revelation comes automatically during chanting, for the chanting of the Lord's name is our meditation and a most important part of the process of God consciousness. At the time I came, Swami Bhaktivedanta, the Prabhupada was known as Swamiji at that time, Swami Bhaktivedanta was at the San Francisco temple, but his message is so fine that I was attracted to Krishna and to the Swami by the teachings he had given to his disciples. Sometime later, as Swamiji was arriving at the airport, I and some of my godbrothers-to-be were preparing the feast. We were very anxious to meet our Guru. Finally, we were told that he was downstairs in the temple, and we hurriedly fumbled there to greet our spiritual master. He was clad in saffron robes and grandly sitting on his throne-like altar. He was a magnificent sight, as I beheld him every morning at kirtan. Never have I met a person who exhibited the godly qualities of this person. It is my pleasure to try to be the loving servant of my spiritual master, and through him to learn to serve Krishna. Srila Prabhupada. Jai Madhusudan Ji Jai.
Very nice article. Any other comments? I think Govardhan had one first, and then we can take yours, Raj. Yes, Govardhan.
I just had a quick comment, because you're talking about vegetarianism. Yesterday we were distributing books in La Jolla with Bhakti Soul, and this Indian family came up to me and said, "Hey, do you know where there's a restaurant?" And I said, "Oh, you should be careful. They serve meat." And then he said, "Oh, it's okay." And I told him, "No, you shouldn't go." But he said, no, it's okay. So I tried.
Yeah.
Regarding LSD and monks, some of you guys might have heard this, but there's a story of a monk who was offered some LSD, way more than a normal person should have. He took it, but nothing really happened to him, because his mind, through breathing and meditation, he can achieve the same things that these drugs do, through chemical imbalances or all those other aspects.
Yeah, I did hear that story.
So it is possible to get in those altered states simply without the drugs, because it is possible in the human mind.
So, all right, any other? I'm not sure. All right.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes.
Yes, a quick reflection or...
Sure. Did you put yourself on mute? Because I can't hear you. Or we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now, Prabhu?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So on when you say people get bored, on that note, people say, then doctor says that means you have a problem, you are bored, you are depressed. They start giving medicine to some people when they say I'm bored, or when they go to the doctor or something, then they say, oh, that is a problem. So in this society, the doctors always, they think the boring, if they get bored, that means something is wrong, and that means more sense enjoyment is necessary. That's what I would just want to share. Thank you.
Yeah. Interesting times, right?
Hare Krishna. Nice
Hare Krishna.
Yes. Please ask.
Balaram Prabhu, Dandavat Pranams. My question is, why is it that the senses cannot be controlled unless engaged in bhakti? Because I don't see the devotees stopping to engage their senses. They eat, they sleep, they feast, they are happy. So that is my question.
Okay. Yeah, so the senses, by nature, they need engagement. And also, we by nature as living entities, we're pleasure-seeking, and we're also, we desire things, right? We have desires. So our nature is that, well, we could go either way. We could engage our senses materially and through material desires and enjoyment, or we could do it spiritually, spiritual desires, spiritual engagement. So we have to pick. We can't just, okay, now I'm going to sit here and do nothing. And even then our mind will be active, right? And practically speaking, it will force us to act. So we have to act. It's just, there's no way around it. Just like in traffic, you say, I'm not going to participate in traffic while you're driving on the freeway 80 miles an hour. Well, good luck, you have to participate. So that's like life. We have to participate. We can't just, I'm just going to stand here and watch. Well, no, it doesn't work like that. So, but Krishna consciousness, we're able to control our senses because we're experiencing a higher happiness, and the senses, and the senses and mind, they won't degrade us if our senses are fully engaged in Krishna's service. So in that way, it's a way to control the senses. And for more about this, there's a beautiful book written by Srila Prabhupada, Nectar of Instruction. Text 1, Vacho Vega Manasoka. It talks about, Srila Prabhupada explains how to control the senses. Or you have, what is it, the 6th canto, Ambarish Maharaj? You have Ambarish Maharaj, right? Savai Mana, no, 8th canto. 8th canto? 9? Okay, well, 6, 8, 9, okay, now we go. Savai Mana Krishna Padada of India, right? He's engaged in his mind, all of his senses. So yeah, this is the way to control.
So if I may, in accordance with your answer, if I do not engage my senses in bhakti, then I will degrade myself.
Yes, that's true.
Oh, so it is the suicidal course.
Yes, that's true.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
All right, thank you. Hare Krishna. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.